some of those sailors, and they didn't want to do that, so they actually bombed a little too far inland, and it wasn't as effective as they thought it might be. There were 21,000 casualties in D-Day. Now, I think one of the key things is with my father. My father, yeah, he was a tough guy, and after visiting this and realizing he was in D-Day, I decided to cut him some slack. He didn't talk about it. All I knew was that my father was in D-Day and he traveled around Europe. So I started doing some research and found out some pretty significant things, and the fact that what his group did was pretty significant in the operation. So, and that's what you hear a lot of, that they didn't talk about it. Okay, where's Amra? Is he here? He left? Oh, here we go.
Presentation.
Yeah.
Told you to bring the mouse.
There we go. Okay, there we go. All right. So I'm going to mix in some things about my father and then some things about the operation in general. This was my father. He was in the Navy. He went in March of '44. He was 19. And as you can see, March, April, May, June, he was in 3 months, and then he was in D-Day. So he got really great training, you know. Oh, wrong way. So I knew he was in D-Day. That's pretty much what he said. And what this is his separation from the service. So what it does is it tells you what he. Doesn't work on it. Can you see that? Can't see that.
Yeah, there it is.
Down there, it's not up there, right? All right, well, anyway. So the significant things of this is, what I want to show you was, he went into Camden, he trained in Bainbridge for 3 months, went to New York, they took him across, and he was in Task Force 127. You see that 127, that's significant. I don't know what the unit for and all that is, but he spent a lot of time in Bremerhaven when they were staging all this. All these guys were in England. And hundreds of thousands of troops in England, and the whole thing is secret. I mean, you know, the Germans don't know what's going on. They know we're going to invade. They just don't know when and where. And anyway, Plymouth was one of the places where they did the stationing. He was on a ship. Now, again, all I know is in D-Day. What happened was, and I didn't know he was on the Surreys because the Surreys is a World War I light cruiser. And I found an interview with a fellow that was at a nursing home in Maryland. And it turns out he starts talking, and I have a YouTube interview with him. He was in Task Force 127. He was on the HMS Surreys. HMS is a British ship. Why are they on a British ship? Well, the guy said they didn't have enough British sailors for 7,000 ships. So they had to put American sailors on these British ships. So it was run by the British and the Americans. And the fellow said, well, we had to get it ready, and this is why they're getting the staging over there, they're getting ready to do the invasion. And he said, we had to clean the ship up, and we literally had to shovel the cockroaches out of the ship to get it ready for the invasion. This is the fellow that I found the interview with. You can see he was in Task Force 127 at the bottom, and he was on the Surreys. And what their job was, is they were shuttle control ships for the Omaha Beach sector. There were 2 ships. There was the HMS Cape Town and the HMS Surreys. The Surreys was anchored inshore, and the Cape Town was anchored offshore. And when all the men and the equipment and supplies come in, they were directing these people how to get into the beach and where to go. So they were actually pretty close to the action. Well, this is where the guys mentioned 127 and being on the Surreys and what they did. They're the flagship for convoys entering the Omaha Beach sector, unloading equipment and supplies. He also mentions, he says there were ships as far as you could see. Well, 7,000 ships coming across there. It's pretty tight. This is a letter to the Cape Town and the Surreys sailors congratulating them on the job that they did. Now remember, I don't know what any of this is. I'm researching this and finding this out, and these are things he left behind. We had some orders from him, letters like such as this. So they're congratulating him on and the crew on their part on liberating France. Again, I want to show you this just so you can see. It's kind of what the thing I'm showing you, but you can see how close England and France was. Now, the Germans thought we were going to come across up here at Dover and Calais because that's the shortest distance, and we did a lot to help them think that and continue to think that. For example, Patton. Hitler thought Patton would lead the invasion because he was the great general, and so we stationed Patton in Dover, and they knew it. The Germans knew he was there, and they wanted them to know it. They wanted the Germans to know that. We had all these fake tanks in Dover. They blew up the balloons. You've probably seen pictures of this. They were fake tanks. They would put telephone poles, and it would look like cannons and so forth. So it looked like we were going to come from Dover. Hitler believed it. Everybody believed it, and we did everything we could. We had false transmissions going across where it seemed like there were a lot of people there. In fact, what was the story? Karen, tell the story about the prisoner.
One prisoner, German prisoner, was being sent home. So they had this they put him in a car with curtains on the windows, but they left a space. And they had fake street signs and town signs and showed all these tanks and whatever, and he thought he was in Calais. And he went back and he said, I saw it with my own eyes, that they are gearing up for Calais and not Normandy. And that was one of many deceptions that they had.
In the interview with this fellow that was on my father's ship, he says, like I'm looking at there's 7,000 ships, so I'm trying to find a map that would show the HMS Surrey. Well, 7,000 ships are not going to show 7,000 ships, but the guy says, when we got there, we were so close to the USS Texas, which was a battleship that had been doing bombing for several hours before the invasion. We were so close to the Texas that we could see projectiles going out. And if you see this map, that's where the Texas was. So my father was right that close to the action right there. So, that's the USS Texas. And this was a letter from James Forrestal, who was Secretary of the Navy at the time. Again, congratulating them on the work that they've done, and they crushed 2 fleets and so forth. And anyway, that's some of the things he left behind. He also left some pictures behind, which I never looked at. They're in an album. They got the little corners on them, and I've decided recently to take them out. And there's things written on the back, and I'll show you some of those significant pictures, maybe even historical pictures. And this is the code breakers. I'm Karen, talk about the code breakers a little bit.
This trip actually started in London. We spent 4 nights in London and saw the D-Day part in London before it started. And this is Bletchley Park, and this is where the code breakers were. And this lessened the war by 2 to 4 years and maybe the whole outcome. This is the monument there, and it says, we also served in code, because that's what they did, and no one knew. It was a mansion there, and they started with a few of the best and the brightest to figure out these codes, and by the end there were 10,000 people working there, each in their own little group. They had no idea what the other guy was doing. And this is the Enigma machine that they captured from the Germans. It had 3 different cylinders that would change the letters, and they broke the Enigma. And then the next thing they did was add a 4th cylinder, which took a lot more to get that 4th cylinder broken. And then the Germans went to the Lorenz, which was even more sophisticated. And this other machine they called the bomb. And here's all these cylinders that are breaking the code. And Alan Turing was the leader of this group who made the Colossus, which is the precursor to the computer. So all this was going on there, and in this big complex, they had a place to highlighting the carrier pigeons that they caught one and changed it, and sent fake messages that way, and there were just many ways that they decepted the Germans and figured out all these things and sent them fake messages. They also had double agents. They had one double agent who made 27 other fake spies. They'd give them a little bit of real information, and then they sent them all this fake information.
And the Germans didn't know we broke the code, which is the key. We knew everything the Germans were doing, and they didn't know we knew. So, and this whole invasion was really between the deception and the luck that was involved. Deception being what we talked about at Calais, how the fake tanks and so forth were there, and Patton was there, the false transmissions that we were sending, the pigeons Karen just mentioned, the prisoner deceptions you mentioned. Hitler was sleeping. During the invasion, Hitler was sleeping. And the Panzers weren't that far away, but everybody was afraid to wake Hitler up, and he was the only person that could release the Panzers. So if that would have happened, the Panzers would have got there, they would really have thrown a monkey wrench into this whole thing. So anyway, he didn't get up until noon. The invasion was going on. He said, that's just a ruse. They're just trying to make us think they're going to come here. They're really going to Calais. And then Rommel, he actually had a place where his headquarters was not too far away. And he left and went to Germany to visit his wife. It was her birthday, so Rommel wasn't there. And the other key thing was the weather. I mean, we were supposed to go July 5th. The weather was horrible. If they didn't go July 6th, they were going to have to wait another month. Now you've got hundreds of thousands of men in Europe, in England. And what are these guys going to do? They're already losing morale because they're standing around, they're getting ready, they're training. And so they took a chance on going. And Eisenhower made that decision to go. And he actually, even though the weather was bad, and he actually wrote a letter that never had to be used, of course, taking the blame for the failure of this operation in case that should have happened. This was Rommel's bunker. This was his headquarters, not too far from Normandy. Or it actually is in Normandy. And it's interesting because this picture, the guide showed us this picture of Rommel getting out of his car, and this is a big castle. And then I took this picture, which coincidentally is in the exact same spot where they took a picture of Rommel. This was real interesting. This is Eisenhower's headquarters. This is the room. This is a relief map. It's made out of wood, and it's the entire, this is just part of it, but it's the entire coast of Europe. And when they had this made, they were saying, well, why are you making the entire coast of Europe? You just want to know about Normandy. So, well, if we just do Normandy and this gets in the wrong hands, we're going to know where we're coming. So they did the entire coast of Europe. And you can see, this is called Piccadilly Circus, that circle up there. And they were coming from all different places where they've been staged in England. And they all met there, and that was kind of a place where they didn't crash into each other, so they could all, make their correct turns, and they all came down to the Normandy beaches. This is it's called the name of the town.
St. Ignatius or something.
Yeah. Anyway, if you've ever seen The Longest Day, the paratroopers, they went in early, and their job, they were paratrooping or jumping behind enemy lines. Their job was to secure the bridges, blow up some of the bridges so that the Germans could not reinforce, and also to secure a couple of bridges so that our guys could get across if in fact they made it away. And this is, if you've ever seen The Longest Day movie, the guy's hanging on the church, and this is actually the church, and they got a dummy that was hanging up there. And on the right you can see some of the obstacles they had to come through. All those ships were hitting. This is Point du Hoc, and that's where the Ranger Battalion, they had to come into this beach and go up these cliffs, and this is where the big guns were for the Germans, and they had to get them knocked out. And these guys under fire had to go up these cliffs and climb these ladders, and it was just, it's just incredible that they were able to do that. And these are a couple of the bunkers where the big guns were. That's a German pillbox on the right. This particular area, Pointe du Hoc, they kind of left that like it was, and all the craters and the bombs and so forth are still there. It's another pillbox. There's some pillboxes up on the side of the mountain. You can imagine coming across the beaches, and you got these guys all hidden up there shooting at you. There's Utah Beach. That was one of the U.S. beaches. I'm not sure if this is Utah or Omaha, and I'll tell you the difference about those in a second, but I thought just, you know, looking at the obstacles and the ships and what's going on there was kind of give you a feel for what it might have been like. I don't know if we could ever feel that. Utah Beach, now the difference between Utah Beach and Omaha Beach is how long the beach was. You can see this is Utah Beach. They didn't have many casualties at Utah because, I mean, you can see where you come across and then you're in a cover already. And another, just a side point, this little sign up here with a guy on it, they were all over Normandy. All these signs were all over, and they're people that were killed in the invasion, and they were honoring them. This was Omaha Beach. Omaha Beach was really the toughest one. Of course, that was a U.S. beach, and they had to go 250, 300 yards under heavy fire, open beach, no cover, and that's where they had most of their fortifications, the Germans. So if you saw the other one, Utah Beach, and then now you look how far they had to go, you know, to get across again under fire and no cover. So this actually, a lady took this picture. I went out on the beach, Omaha Beach, and I wrote my dad's name and year. I don't know if you know, Teddy Roosevelt's son fought in World War I, and now he's in D-Day, he's in World War II. He's got to be 50 years old, and he's leading he successfully led his group to Utah Beach. He actually won the Medal of Honor. That's his gravesite, and 2 weeks after this, he died of a heart attack. This is the U.S. Cemetery on Omaha Beach. Very emotional. Again, I'd say because when you look at these, you know, thanks to these guys, we live the way we do. I went through and found some pictures of, you know, some people from New Jersey, and then for those of you from Pennsylvania, there's plenty of those. Interesting. There were coins on the top of some of these graves, these crosses and stars, and I didn't know what that was, and I looked into it, and it turns out the coins are left there by a comrade that was with him when they were killed, that have gone back and visited. And of course, the unknown soldiers, there's plenty of those.
Known only to God, it says.
What's that?
It says, known only to God.
Known only to God.
Crosses.
Yeah. Some of these stories are incredible. So this guy was an engineer, and he gets off his LSD, jumps in the water, and the engineer's job was to try to get rid of some of these obstacles that are on the beach so that the soldiers can get in. So they get in there and they're trying to blow them up and so forth. So he gets out of his LSD, gets shot in the spinal cord. He's 20 years old, paralyzed for life. The last steps he ever took were on Omaha Beach. These are two brothers, and one day the family gets a telegram saying, you know, your son was killed. The next day, they get another telegram saying, your other son was killed. These are brothers, 4 brothers. One was in the Pacific, and anyway, 3 of them were killed. The one in the Pacific, I think, returned home. They thought he was missing, but anyway, that's the basis on the Saving Private Ryan movie. This is the chapel ceiling in the U.S. Cemetery, and I circled that ship because that's the Queen Mary, and this is one of my father's photographs. And on the back he wrote, these are the lucky guys to get to take her home. It's the Queen Mary, as it was used as a troop ship. So we stayed in a hotel for a couple days, and we were there with all these British veterans of D-Day. And so we hang out with them and sit around with them and listen to their stories. There are 122 British veterans left. This fellow, he was on a British ship, and he was a gunner. So he said, we're taught to go, dit, 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 dit. He said, well, I got a German plane coming at me. So it's like, dit, 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 dit. Well, the gun blows up. He said it was bad ammunition. He blows up. He's overboard. They fish him out. He's dead. Put him in a body bag, lift up the body bag, transfer the body bag to another ship, and an aide is walking around, and he thought he saw some movement, and he's smoking. He unzipped the body bag, blew smoke in, zipped it back up, the guy started coughing. And everybody starts cheering, this guy's alive.
Here he is 90 years later, there he is.
Yeah, 90
years
yeah, these guys were all 94, or else they lied about their age. Another veteran, but we were, we spent a lot of time with him. This was a code breaker, Karen, right?
Yeah, he was one of the code breakers.
Yeah, he was a sergeant in the RAF, and that's a picture of him when he was younger. These guys were, I don't know if they were like my dad, where they didn't talk about the war and talk about their experiences, but right now they're talking about them and they're rock stars. I mean, they got their medals on, they're all dressed, girls are kissing them and hugging them, and they're living the good life now. This is a fellow that we met. He was on a British ship, and this ship got sunk. He got pulled out, and then they put him on a submarine. He became a submariner. And anyway, so we met him. We were talking to him, and we looked. Somebody had a magazine. We looked in the magazine, and you can see he's a rock star. This fellow is an American veteran. We saw him at Utah Beach, and you can see the picture of him down here with some German soldiers. Well, they captured some Germans, and these guys are 14 years old. So rather than send them to a POW camp and whatever happens to them there, he made arrangements for them to he made transportation arrangements for them to get back home in Germany. So how cool is that? Nice guy. These pictures always amaze me because this is the liberation of France going through the Arc de Triomphe, and then I took this picture, and they always amaze me when you see the soldiers going through, and you see the Germans high stepping through there and all that, and then to be able to go over and experience that. My dad was in transportation, as it turns out. Once he got to Europe, once he was ashore, he got to transportation, and I have some of his orders. One set of orders where he was transporting 30 German prisoners from someplace else to Kiel, and he had so many days to do it. And anyway, I thought it was interesting because there they were working on his, I don't know, that's probably a deuce and a half, I guess that's what they call them. And then reenactors. I mean, there were thousands of reenactors, World War II reenactors there, and hundreds and hundreds of tanks and trucks and jeeps. And these guys happen to be doing the same thing that these guys are doing 75 years later. Got the same problem. And this is another picture I pulled out of my dad's album, and I looked at the back. Again, I said I never looked at the back really. Pulled it out, and this is what he wrote to his father. This is what I saw in Europe. This is what I saw Europe in. So that was his truck. These pictures, I have no idea how he got these. Now, I think this task force might have done some cleanup afterwards. And so I said to my mom, I said, gee, where did Dad get that picture? She says, I think he took it. I said, no, I don't think so. But these are German airplanes. I'm thinking because of the cleanup and because of him moving prisoners, perhaps he got them from some prisoners. It's a German radio guy. This is interesting. I found this picture. It's blurry. Now these pictures are only like this big. But I saw this picture and I looked at it and I thought, you know what? That looks like one of these tall ships. And I started researching it and found out that the Germans back in the 1930s had 4 sister ships, these big tall ships. And one of them became the Coast Guard training ship, the Eagle. So I thought, I wonder if that could be the Eagle. Well, there were 4 of them. The Russians got one. Brazil got one as a war reparation for boats that got sunk for Brazil. They ended up giving theirs to Portugal. Romania got one. So anyway, I sent this. Anybody ever watch Drain the Oceans? It's the greatest show on TV. Really. If you like anything about underwater and ships and shipwrecks, watch Drain the Oceans. And there's a guy that's a marine archaeologist, and he's got a company called Search Inc. So I sent this picture to him and said, here's the story. You know, it's one of 4 ships. Here's the one I think it is. And they wrote back and confirmed that that is the Eagle. And then I happened to find, see the crane in the background here? I don't know why this darn thing doesn't work. But anyway, whatever it is. There we go. See that crane in the background there? There's a crane. And you see that crane right there? Well, I'm wondering if, to me, I think that might be the same, similar ship, just a different angle there. But anyway, I thought it was pretty cool to find that. And of course, that's what it looks like today.
Wow.
Anyway, so I think that's kind of it. Here, anything you want to add here? Yeah. It was a great trip. I learned a lot. I mean, I have a lot of respect for my father. I always did, but I mean, the fact that he was this involved in something like this is just incredible. And I don't know if any of you knew my father. He brought me here when I was 6 or 7, I guess, in Stratford the first time. Yeah. So anyway, all right. Thanks for your attention.